My God, look at this fire, and on such an important day for Russia. More about it in the report. June 3rd, 2026. We are in the 5th year, and this is day 101 since the start of the full-scale invasion. Welcome to the Situation Report. In today's report, we will take a look at the economic forum on the Russian side, which has just been treated to quite a fireworks show from Ukrainian drones. We will also take a look at the reaction of Russian bloggers, or rather, their outbursts of rage. We will also look at other attacks on ships, as well as Russian attacks on Ukrainian cities, and much more. There are shifts at the front as always, or rather like in the past few weeks, almost none at all. At the front, nearly everything has stopped. Most activity now happens far from the front and usually involves drone attacks. Meanwhile, in St. Petersburg, and where is that anyway? Let's take a look. On the map, that's up here, so basically north from Ukraine across the entire western part of Russia, over Belarus, then past the Baltic countries, and up there it is, St. Petersburg, because that's where the economic forum's taking place, or rather somewhere around here in this area, that's where the forum is. Up here is an interesting port, which we'll be talking about today. Because while in St. Petersburg, Germans and Central Americans, entrepreneurs, and some AfD politicians are officially taking part in an economic forum in Russia for the first time in years, and talking about the time after a possible ceasefire, in the same city, St. Petersburg's oil terminal was attacked. The images show a hit on one of the city's most important energy facilities. The terminal plays a central role in the handling of oil and oil products and is therefore part of the infrastructure that is of great importance for Russian energy exports. The timing? It could hardly be more interesting, because while company representatives and politicians were discussing how to maintain economic ties with Russia and rebuild them in the long term, Ukrainian FP-1 drones were flying at the same time. Larger drone attacks against the infrastructure on which a significant part of the Russian export economy is based. So Ukraine is demonstrating to everyone who stands on Russia's side what military capabilities Ukraine possesses, and that's very important. What's particularly remarkable is that such attacks are now taking place not only in the border regions or at the front lines. St. Petersburg is hundreds of kilometers away from Ukraine and was considered relatively safe for a long time. Today, Ukrainian drones are even reaching Russia's economic centers. This once again shows that Ukraine is increasingly focusing its strategy on critical infrastructure, energy facilities, and logistics. Above all, it shows that the Russians are not able to stop the drones over such a long distance. And this happens right in front of the visitors of the Economic Forum. The view remains as beautiful as ever. Equally beautiful are the Russian drone defense units, which continue to try to repel this attack even after the first wave of hits. This is what Russia has to offer up here when it comes to air defense, so we shouldn't be surprised that this port was hit. And just imagine that. This attack occurs when guests, including international ones, are expected. And Russia has a few soldiers here with assault rifles, more or less as the only defense measure against air threats. The rest is stationed at Putin's Villa. At sea, as well as in Moscow's defense ring and occasionally at the front. By the way, the Kremlin is also trying to defend against something because they're playing the victim and now see themselves as justified in continuing the war. It's not like they haven't been continuing it for years and always seeing themselves as being in the right. Because Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said during a press conference when he was asked what Russia intends to do about the drone attacks here in St. Petersburg, that the special operation will continue in order to put an end to such strikes. That's certainly a good joke for lunchtime, because if they had never attacked Ukraine, they wouldn't have to see burning oil terminals now. They could also simply end the war, and then the strikes would stop as well. But what will bring about more strikes is a war that continues. The St. Petersburg Economic Forum was supposed to show that Russia remains an attractive business location despite the war and sanctions. Instead, the event began with fire and a burning oil terminal. In addition to the attacks, there were also restrictions at Pulkovo Airport, Dozens of flights were delayed or canceled. Ironically, just as Russia wanted to present itself to the world as a force for global stability, it became clear that this was only an abstract concept. The real goal of the forum is no longer to attract investors. It's about projecting an image of normalcy. Russia is waging war against Ukraine, facing sanctions, and keeps attacking Ukrainian cities and infrastructure. At the same time, the participants are discussing a stable future, pragmatic dialogue, and a new global architecture. Interesting. Actually, the whole thing is quite bizarre again, because it doesn't just show that Ukraine is able to hit these targets. No, it also shows that the drones were able to fly through Russian airspace for about 6 hours without any problems, without being intercepted. In my opinion, that says more than the hit itself. How do the Russian bloggers actually assess the situation? That was mainly my point of view. Let's take a look at the other side. While growth, investments, and the future of the Russian economy are being discussed in the halls of the St. Petersburg Economic Forum, even Russian Z bloggers are increasingly losing their patience. The military blogger Goldman, known for his outbursts, commented on the forum with remarkable candor. Quote, "What economy do you even want to talk about? We need reforms. We can only sell oil, gas, and wood. That's it. Period." His criticism of the growing dependence on China is interesting. Even when it comes to fiber optic cables, Russia is now dependent on Chinese supplies, and even those, according to Goldman, are of poor quality. He then went a step further and claimed that the Chinese have already taken over everything in Siberia anyway. For a long time, turning to China was considered a great alternative to Europe and the West. Meanwhile, however, complaints are increasingly being heard from patriotic and journalistic circles that Russia is being pushed more and more into the role of an economic puppet. This also fits with a problem that was not addressed at the Economic Forum itself. Russia continues to export raw materials successfully, but it is more difficult when it comes to modern technologies, investments, and especially industrial development. And that's exactly why many debates now revolve less around growth and more around the question of how dependent Russia has actually become on China. When even Russian war bloggers, during the country's most important economic forum, ask what kind of economy people even want to talk about, that probably says more about the mood than many official sources report. According to available information, the Ukrainian attack on St. Petersburg did not only hit the port infrastructure. According to reports, the corvette Boyki of the Staragushi class was also hit and severely damaged in a dry dock. It is currently burning down. That would be a significant loss for the Russian Baltic Fleet because the ship is one of the most modern surface combat vessels Russia has in the Baltic Sea and is designed for air defense, anti-submarine warfare, and operations against sea and land targets. What is particularly remarkable is the location of the attack because this dry dock is actually considered the heart of the Russian naval presence near St. Petersburg, and like the city itself, is located hundreds of kilometers from the Ukrainian border. Just a few years ago, a drone attack on a warship here would have been almost unimaginable. But together with the hits on the oil terminal, this creates a much bigger picture. Ukraine didn't just attack any target in St. Petersburg, but also targeted naval facilities in the process. Currently, the ship is burning a bit, but we should find out exactly what kind of damage the ship has sustained. Then we would have another indication that even important Russian naval bases are no longer out of reach of Ukrainian drones, and such attacks could possibly cause enormous damage as well. So far, we only see a cloud of smoke after the hit, nothing more. Russian soldiers have once again used phosphorus munitions near Konstantynivka. The footage shows the typical incendiary devices raining down, spreading over large areas, and igniting numerous individual fires. Such weapons are often used to drive defenders out of fortified positions, buildings, or wooded areas. Unlike with a conventional warhead, the effect here is mainly in the fires, burns, poisoning, and the psychological impact on the affected soldiers. Their use shows how important Konstantynivka remains to Russia's current attack plans. For months, Russian forces have been trying to put pressure on the Ukrainian defensive lines around the city, or to make gains within the city itself. Despite heavy losses and continuous attacks, the decisive breakthrough has not yet been achieved. What we see here are mainly a lot of urban and house-to-house fighting taking place almost everywhere in the city without a clear front line that can be drawn. Because somehow almost every district is being fought over by both the Ukrainians and the Russians. As urban combat and fortified positions become harder to overcome, attackers increasingly use incendiary weapons, heavy glide bombs, or massive artillery bombardment. The images from Konstantynivka once again show the intensity with which the last major Ukrainian defensive positions in Donbass are being fought over. Russia has once again attacked Dibro with ballistic missiles, hitting warehouses of a supermarket chain. According to current reports, at least 6 people have been injured. The images once again show a familiar pattern. Instead of military targets, the attack hit civilian infrastructure used by the population and for supplies. Warehouses and logistics areas that distribute goods and food daily were damaged. It's especially bitter because Dibro has already been the target of Russian attacks several times in recent weeks. Just recently, warehouses belonging to aid organizations, or more precisely UN logistics companies and supply facilities, were hit there. While Moscow regularly talks about attacks on military targets, the footage from Dibro once again shows destroyed civilian buildings, burning warehouses, and injured civilians. For the people on the ground, it makes little difference in the end what justification is later released. After all, the facilities that were hit are those that serve everyday life and, above all, supplying the population. Finally, in Tula, there was an explosion at an arms factory. Local channels report a fire on the premises of the weapons and ammunition manufacturer, A+A. This is another example of how Ukrainian attacks are increasingly targeting the Russian arms industry itself. Previously, attacks targeted civilian infrastructure, fuel depots, refineries, and airfields, but now weapons, ammunition, and military equipment production facilities are increasingly targeted. Lastly, what we have hardly seen in recent weeks are reports from the Russian side. The problem is, and I've been asked about this in the comments several times, I always read the comments, some people said that it's become a bit one-sided lately. That's true, of course, it has become very one-sided, especially in recent weeks, but there are hardly any reports of success on the Russian side that are really worth reporting on. If the Russians ever make territorial gains, if the Russians accomplish something bigger, invent some kind of innovation on the battlefield, like back then, for example, turtle tanks or fiber optic drones and so on, then I always report on it. Of course, that wouldn't be a problem at all. I get that kind of information very quickly. But lately, things have slowed down. We can see it ourselves at the front. There's hardly any progress, neither for the Russians nor for the Ukrainians. There are almost no territorial gains to report. Of course, that's a bit unfortunate for a situation report. For a situation report that originally focused on the front, there aren't really any developments within the Russian army at the moment. Most of the time, there are only negative developments, and that then makes the report seem pro-Ukrainian, which is true to a certain extent. That means, for example, when Russian soldiers beat each other up again because someone tried to desert, or when they hang each other from trees again, then that's a piece of news I got from the pro-Russian camp, because over there, they see it as a deterrent against imitators. But in the context of a video, it's seen as pro-Ukrainian again, and therefore more one-sided. That's why I've always tried to keep it pretty balanced, but right now, what great things can you actually report from the Russian side that would be worth mentioning? But at the end of the day, of course, that's good for the Ukrainian side again. And with that, I want to thank all subscribers, channel members, and Alja Cruz. Special thanks to Lieutenant Colonel Renicky, Zilla, Dietrich, Freddie, and Meyerhofer. Subscribe, like, or comment, and see you in the next situation report.
Cześć.